Welcome back, everybody. Ready for another deep dive?
Absolutely. Always ready to jump into a new case.
Great. Well, today we're taking a look at a cold case that really shook a nation. The disappearance of 5-year-old Timothy Wiltsey.
Oh, yeah. The Timmy Wiltsey case.
Timmy to his family.
Right.
And it's a story that, just captivated the headlines back in 1991 and then took a really heartbreaking 25 years to resolve. So to set the scene, we're in South Amboy, New Jersey.
Okay.
Seemingly ordinary town, totally shaken by this extraordinary event. Timmy was, from what I read, described as a pretty quiet boy who, like a lot of kids, loved his cat and fire trucks and all that good stuff. But then he just vanishes from this really bustling carnival.
Yeah, I remember seeing his picture. It was everywhere.
Oh, yeah. His picture was on milk cartons all over the country. Just a symbol of both hope and just utter despair, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And, of course, hundreds of people joined the search, desperate to find him. But really, right from the get-go, there was this dark cloud of suspicion hanging over the whole case. And it ultimately focused on, well, someone you wouldn't expect. Timmy's mother, Michelle Ludzinski.
Yeah, it's interesting, it's like that classic story, that fear we all have.
Yeah.
You're at a crowded place, you turn your back for just a second, and then suddenly your child is gone. But then as they dug into Michelle's story, things started to not add up, did they?
Yeah. I mean, her story, it just kept changing.
Right.
At first, she said she had just turned away to get a soda, and then poof, he's gone.
Right.
And then later, she brings in this whole kidnapping thing, saying these two guys abducted Timmy at knife point.
Mm-hmm.
And then later, she adds in this whole other mysterious woman named Ellen.
Oh, wow.
Who supposedly vanished with Timmy.
I mean, it makes you think, right? When a story, especially a parent's story, changes so much, it's a huge red flag for investigators.
It has to be. So what do you think? What's going on there psychologically?
Well, you have to consider a lot of factors. Sometimes, someone might change their story because they're just panicked.
Yes.
Or scared, even if they didn't do anything wrong. But then other times, it's deliberate. They're trying to mislead investigators.
Cover something up.
Exactly. And figuring out which it is, that's the puzzle investigators have to solve.
Right. So as the investigation into Michelle and all her claims kind of went on, more troubling details came out, didn't they?
Oh, absolutely. So for one, Michelle, she refused to meet with any of Timmy's classmates.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and they had all gotten together to raise reward money.
Oh,
and
wow.
then there were the polygraph tests. She failed multiple times.
Ooh, those lie detector tests.
Yeah, they're supposed to, measure your physiological responses, like your heart rate, how much you're sweating. But they're not always reliable. It's a whole debate whether they should even be used in court.
Yeah, I can see how that would be tricky.
But then on top of that, people were commenting on Michelle's demeanor.
Okay, yeah.
People who saw her said she seemed, well, detached. Not how you'd expect a mother whose child is missing to act.
Yeah, that's really unsettling.
Yeah.
So 5 months pass, and the case takes a really dark turn. They find something in a marshland. A child's shoe.
Oh, yeah.
With a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle print on it. Just like Timmy's.
And here's the thing. The shoe was found in the same business park where Michelle had worked before.
Really?
Yeah, a place she never even mentioned to the police.
Oh, wow.
It just made everything that much more suspicious.
So at that point, any hope that Timmy was still alive, I imagine, was pretty much gone.
Pretty much. And then, about a year later, it's confirmed, they find Timmy's skull near the shoe.
Oh, that's awful.
Yeah. And because of decomposition, they couldn't say exactly how he died, but they did rule it a homicide. And Michelle's reaction to all this was, strange.
Strange how?
People at Timmy's funeral, they said she just seemed apathetic, like she wasn't even grieving.
That's so disturbing. So, I mean, it makes you wonder, how often does something like this happen? Where a parent is involved in their own child's death?
It's more common than we'd like to think, and it's something investigators have to consider.
Yeah, of course.
There are certain behaviors that can be red flags. We've already talked about the inconsistent stories, but also not showing the right emotions, trying to blame someone else, any history of abuse or neglect.
Those are all really worrying signs.
They are. And then, get this, about a year and a half after Timmy's remains were found, Michelle stages her own abduction.
What?
Yeah. She claims she was forced to keep quiet about Timmy's murder by the FBI.
She's really doubling down on this whole victim narrative.
It was a desperate attempt to shift the focus, but her story fell apart pretty quickly, and she ended up getting charged with filing a false police report.
So she gets house arrest and probation for that. But then for years, she just seemingly moves on with her life.
Yeah.
Moves to different states, has more kids, keeps her past hidden. It seems like she almost got away with it.
Yeah, for a while it seemed that way. But Timmy's case, it just never went away. It's crazy to think, right, that this case stayed open for so long.
I know. And to think about Timmy's case just sitting there unresolved while she's out there living her life, it's just...
Yeah, it's a tough one. But eventually they caught a break, didn't they?
They did. And it happened on what would have been Timmy's 29th birthday. Michelle was finally arrested for his murder.
And the thing that finally got them there, a blue and white blanket.
The blanket they found with his shoe.
The very same. You see, they were doing a cold case review and decided to show the blanket to Timmy's cousin.
Smart.
And she recognized it right away, said it was from Michelle's house.
Oh, wow. So that placed Timmy in Michelle's care just before he disappeared. So after 25 years, the trial finally began. I mean, what was the prosecution's angle? How did they make their case?
Their whole argument was that Michelle was basically a cold, uncaring mother, that she'd gotten tired of taking care of Timmy.
Right.
And they used everything, her inconsistent stories, her weird behavior, and that blanket, all of it to build a picture of her guilt.
But what about the defense? What did they have to say?
They stuck to their guns, saying she was innocent.
Right.
Their argument was that there wasn't enough hard evidence to actually tie her to the crime scene.
Just that the blanket was there, but that doesn't definitively prove she killed him.
Exactly.
So it was a real he said, she said situation.
It really was.
So what did the jury ultimately decide? I mean, what was the verdict?
Well, after thinking it all over, they came back with a guilty verdict.
Wow.
They found Michelle Ledzinski guilty of murdering her son, Timmy.
And what was the sentence?
30 years in prison, no chance of parole. Justice may have been slow, but it finally arrived.
25 years is a long time to wait.
Uh-huh.
But, even with the conviction, there are still some unanswered questions.
Yeah.
Like, what actually happened to Timmy at the carnival? What could possibly make a mother do something like that? It's just...
It's a mystery, and it's one of the things that makes this case so haunting. We might never know the full story. During the trial, though, the prosecution did present a possible motive.
Oh, really? What was it?
They basically suggested that Timmy might have become too much for Michelle to handle.
Okay.
Testimony showed that he was having some medical issues and that Michelle had talked about being frustrated with being a single mom.
I remember that.
One witness even remembered hearing her say, "I'm a weekend mom and I'm not made for this shit."
Yeah.
Now, whether she meant it literally or was just venting, it does give you a glimpse into her state of mind.
Right.
It suggests she was feeling overwhelmed, maybe even resentful about being a mother. It's just a really sad story all around.
It is. A young life cut short. A mother who chose deception. And justice delayed, but ultimately served. But there's a real cost to all of this,
Yeah.
It shows that even within a family, even in those closest relationships, you can find real darkness. And it really forces us to face the fact that sometimes the people who should be protecting children are the ones who end up hurting them.
And that's a hard truth.
It is. But it's so important to remember, to be aware of the signs of child abuse and neglect, and to speak up if something seems wrong. We have to protect kids. They're the most vulnerable among us.
Absolutely. And I think this case also highlights the incredible dedication of those investigators.
Right.
They never let Timmy's case go cold.
Yeah.
They worked tirelessly year after year, going over old evidence, following new leads, and in the end, they got justice for Timmy.
Their commitment is truly inspiring. It gives you some hope, knowing that even when it feels impossible, the truth can come out.
It does. And it shows that even in the darkest of times, there are people who will fight for justice, for the victims who can't speak for themselves. It reminds us that they're not forgotten.
So we may never know everything about Timmy's case, but we can find some peace knowing that justice was served.
Yeah.
This deep dive, though, has really revealed how complicated cold cases can be. I mean, we're talking about events that happened decades ago. Memories fade, evidence gets lost or damaged.
Right. And witnesses might not be around anymore.
Exactly. So it makes you think, how do you ensure fairness for everyone involved, the victims and the accused, when the evidence is incomplete or has been affected by time? It's a tough ethical and legal issue that investigators have to deal with.
It is. And, in Michelle's case, her defense team was really adamant that the prosecution's case wasn't strong enough. They said it was all circumstantial.
Based on witness testimony and Michelle's changing stories, but not on solid physical evidence. Yeah. And, they have a point. It shows how hard it is to build a case when so much time has gone by.
It definitely highlights the limitations of our justice system, the need to find that balance between getting justice for victims and making sure the accused gets a fair trial, especially when time has muddied the waters.
But then there's the other side of that argument. Should justice be denied just because time has passed?
Yeah.
If there's enough evidence to convince a jury, shouldn't there be a conviction, no matter how long it's been? Yeah. It's a real dilemma.
It is. It comes down to weighing justice, fairness, and the passage of time. Each cold case is different and needs to be carefully considered. The evidence, the testimonies, the legal principles all have to be taken into account.
It really shows that the pursuit of justice is rarely simple. It takes careful thinking, critical analysis, and a willingness to face tough ethical questions.
Exactly. And the Timmy Wiltsey case is a perfect example of that. It's a case that raises more questions than it answers, makes us think about how memory works, about the nature of truth, and about the human need for justice.
It really gets you thinking, doesn't it? About our legal system, about ethics, about how memory works, how we even define truth. It's a lot to process.
It really is. These kinds of stories, they stay with you, they're captivating, but they make you think about some pretty uncomfortable things. About ourselves, about the world. And this case, especially, brings up some really big questions about what it means to be a parent. Like, what do we expect from mothers and fathers? And what happens when those expectations aren't met?
You're right. There's this basic expectation in society that parents will love, care for, and protect their children.
Exactly. It's fundamental.
But when that trust is broken, when a parent hurts their child, it's just devastating. It makes you question everything.
It does. And these cases, they always lead to these really tough conversations about mental health, about poverty, about the support that's available for parents who are struggling. There are so many factors, and it's never easy to find clear answers.
Yeah, no easy answers at all. This case, it's a harsh reminder that even within families, even in those closest relationships, there can be darkness. And we can't ignore that. We have to admit that sometimes the people who are supposed to be protecting kids are the ones who hurt them.
It's a hard pill to swallow, but it's the truth. And it underscores how important it is to build a society where parents have the resources they need, where they feel supported, and where children's well-being comes first.
When we dig into these dark, often really disturbing cases, it's easy to forget about the human side of things, to lose sight of the fact that these aren't just puzzles to solve. They involve real people, real families, whose lives have been shattered by these tragedies.
That's such an important point. We can't forget that behind the headlines, the legal battles, the forensic evidence, there are people who have experienced unimaginable pain. There's Timmy, a little boy robbed of his future. And there's his family, left to pick up the pieces after his senseless death.
Their pain is still so real, even after all these years. And as much as we need justice, it's so important to approach these cases with empathy and understand just how much these crimes cost everyone involved.
Absolutely. And that empathy needs to extend to everyone, even the perpetrators. Now, I'm not saying we should excuse their actions. We have to hold them accountable. But it's crucial to understand what led them to do what they did. It doesn't justify their actions, but it can help us learn and prevent similar tragedies from happening again.
So we've covered a lot of ground today. We've explored the chilling details of Timmy Wiltsey's disappearance, delved into the complexities of cold case investigations, and considered the broader societal and ethical questions these cases raise. As we wrap up our deep dive, what's the most important thing you think our listeners should take away from all this?
For me, it's that even after decades, justice can still be served. It shows how dedicated investigators are, how powerful memory can be, and how important it is to never lose hope. But it also shows us the devastating reality of filicide, a crime that truly shakes our faith in the family bond.
I agree. And for me, it's remembering the human side of these stories. The victims, the families, the investigators. They're not just names or characters. They're real people whose lives have been forever changed by these events.
And remember, we have to be vigilant. We need to be aware of the signs of child abuse and neglect, and we have to speak up if something seems wrong. Protecting children is everyone's responsibility.
Absolutely. This case leaves us with many unanswered questions, but it's given us valuable insight into how memory works, the challenges of pursuing justice after so much time has passed, and the importance of empathy when dealing with tragedy.
Yeah, and maybe, just maybe, it reminds us that even in the darkest stories, there's always hope. Hope for justice, hope that we can learn from these awful events, and hope that we can work together to create a world where kids are safe and protected.
On that note, we'll end our deep dive into the Timmy Wiltsey case. We hope this has been an informative and thought-provoking exploration of a case that continues to impact us all, even after all these years. Thanks for joining us.